My name is Aisha. I am a 30-year-old woman living in a small, familiar apartment building in the city. I have been married to my husband, Daniel, for 5 years. Daniel is a good man, kind and hardworking, but his job requires him to travel often, leaving me alone in our quiet home. Our life is simple, comfortable, and predictable. Across the hall from us lives our neighbor, Felix. He is a quiet, polite man in his mid-30s who keeps to himself but is always ready to help with a friendly smile. I never thought much about him. He was just part of the background of my life. That all changed one sweltering afternoon when the city's power failed, plunging our building into a heavy, silent heat. Daniel was away on a business trip to another city. I was alone, moving through the chores of our apartment, the air so still and hot it felt difficult to breathe. I had just finished hanging the laundry when the lights and fans cut out, leaving only the sound of my own breathing. Seeking relief, I opened all the windows, but little breeze came in. I was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of tepid water, when I heard a firm knock at my door. I opened it to find Felix standing there looking apologetic. "Hello, Aisha. Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice calm. "My ceiling is leaking, and I think the water might be coming from your apartment." Surprised, I let him in. We went to the bathroom, and sure enough, a thin trickle of water was escaping from a pipe under the sink. I hadn't even noticed. "Do you have a wrench?" Felix asked. "I can try to tighten it." I fetched a tool from a kitchen drawer. He knelt on the floor to fix the leak, and I stood in the doorway, watching him work. The small room was close and humid. After a minute, he looked up at me. He smiled, a soft, slow smile that seemed to hold a secret. "You should avoid walking barefoot on these wet tiles," he said quietly. His gaze felt different, intense and focused directly on me. A strange, fluttery feeling rose in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was a sudden, shocking awareness of him as a man, not just a neighbor. I mumbled something about getting a mop and hurried from the room, my heart pounding in a rhythm I didn't recognize. He finished the repair quickly, wiped his hands, and told me it was fixed. I thanked him without meeting his eyes. He hesitated at the door as if he wanted to say more, but then he simply smiled again and left. When the door closed, I leaned against it, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Nothing had happened. Absolutely nothing. And yet, everything felt different. That evening, lying in our bed, the memory of his look replayed in my mind. It was a simple moment, a glance, but it carried a weight that unsettled me deeply. It felt like a door had been cracked open in a wall I didn't know was there. The next morning, I busied myself cleaning, trying to scrub away the strange feeling. There was another soft knock. It was Felix, returning the wrench I had forgotten. "Good morning, Aisha. Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was gentle, his eyes searching mine. I said I was fine, too quickly. He smiled, a knowing, amused little smile. "Your husband comes home today, right?" he asked. I nodded. "Have a good day, then," he said, and turned back to his apartment. I stood there holding the cold metal of the wrench, knowing with a terrible certainty that Felix was no longer just the man across the hall. He had become a question. Daniel returned that afternoon, and his warm, familiar embrace was a relief. I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling his familiar scent, telling myself this was my reality, my safe, loving life. We spent a lovely evening together, and I laughed at his stories, pushing all thoughts of Felix into a dark corner of my mind. But a few days later, I was on our small balcony hanging clothes when I felt a presence. I turned. Felix was on his balcony holding a cup of coffee. Our eyes met across the short distance. I should have looked away, but I didn't. "Good morning, Aisha," he said. "Good morning," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. A heavy silence settled between us, filled with the unspoken tension from days before. "I heard your husband laughing last night," Felix said finally, taking a slow sip. "He seems like a good man." "He is," I said firmly, a defense and a reminder to myself. Felix just nodded, said, "That's good," and went back inside. I stood frozen, my heart thumping. Why did that simple exchange feel like a thrilling and dangerous secret? The tension became a constant hum in my life. I tried to avoid Felix, taking the stairs when I saw him at the elevator, looking down in the hallway. But he didn't avoid me. His "Hello, Aisha" in the corridor felt loaded. His presence was a magnet, pulling at my attention. Then, one stifling night, Daniel fell asleep early on the couch. The apartment felt like an oven. I slipped out onto the balcony for air, and of course he was there. Felix stood in the shadows of his balcony, a cigarette glowing in his hand. I'd never seen him smoke. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice a low rumble in the dark. "No," I admitted. "You neither." "Sometimes the night is louder than the day," he said, a poetic phrase that seemed to hold a world of meaning. We stood in silence for a moment. The city sounds distant below. Then the words tumbled out of me. "You've been different these past few days." He turned his head, and the small light from his apartment caught his smile. "So have you, Aisha." My name on his lips was a caress. He took a step closer, leaning on the railing. We were so close now that the night air between us seemed to vibrate. "Aisha," he whispered. It was a warning, an invitation, a question all in one. I was caught, unable to move or speak. The creak of our balcony door broke the spell. "Are you outside?" Daniel's sleepy voice called. I jumped, turning with a forced smile. "Yes, it's so warm in here." "Come to bed," he said. I nodded and stepped back inside. Before closing the door, I looked one last time at Felix. He hadn't moved. His eyes held mine in the darkness, and in that look, I knew a line had been crossed in our hearts, even if our bodies were still separate. After that night, the quiet attraction became a roaring secret inside me. I was a wife who loved her husband, yet I was constantly aware of the man 20 feet away. I was living two lives, one in my sunny apartment with Daniel, and another in the shadowy, charged space between Felix and me. The avoidance became a game, a dance. I would rush to get the mail, hoping not to see him. He would be there, taking out his trash with a slow nod that felt more intimate than a touch. The air in the hallway thickened with everything we didn't say. One afternoon, a week later, Daniel was at work. I was furiously cleaning, trying to exhaust myself into peace. A knock came at the door. I knew it was him. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. Felix stood there, holding a plastic food container. "I just wanted to return this. Daniel lent it to me," he said. I took it, mumbling thanks, and tried to close the door. His hand came up, stopping it. "Aisha." His voice was deep, serious. "What?" I whispered, staring at his hand on the doorframe. "You're avoiding me." "No, I'm not," I said, the lie weak. "Then look at me and say that." Slowly, against my better judgment, I lifted my eyes to his. The hallway was narrow and he was so close. His gaze was intense, burning with the truth I had been trying to deny. In that moment, the dangerous line we had been walking vanished. We were already on the other side. The attraction was a live wire between us, and neither of us could pretend to ignore it any longer. The final step happened on a quiet evening when Daniel was away on another trip. The loneliness and the constant humming tension became too much. I saw Felix on his balcony, a bottle of beer in his hand. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He simply murmured, "It's less boring when you're not alone." It was an invitation, plain and simple. Every good sense I had screamed for me to turn around, to go inside, to lock my door. But my feet carried me forward, across the hall and through his slightly open door. His apartment was dim, lit by a single lamp. Soft music played. He poured me a glass of wine. We sat on his couch, talking about meaningless things, but the real conversation was in the space between us, in the way he looked at me, in the way my body leaned toward his. Then he moved closer. His hand brushed against my thigh, and a jolt of electricity shot through me. He whispered my name. I didn't pull away. He leaned in, and his lips met mine. The kiss started softly, a question. My answer was to kiss him back, deeply, urgently. All the weeks of tension, of stolen glances, of silent wanting exploded into that moment. The world outside ceased to exist. He stood, held out his hand, and I took it without hesitation. He led me to his bedroom. The door closed softly, sealing us in our private, forbidden world. What followed was a blur of sensation. His hands, his mouth, his skin against mine. His hand slid slowly under my dress, tracing a path of shivers along my thighs. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth and the rightness of his body consume me. His kiss grew more urgent, deeper. As he began to undress me, I could already feel the evidence of his desire. There was no guilt in that moment, only a powerful, overwhelming hunger. When we came together, it was with a passion that felt both shocking and inevitable. It was a raw, tender, desperate connection, a silent scream into the darkness of the room. For those minutes, there was no Daniel, no marriage, no consequences. There was only Felix and me, and a pleasure so intense it felt like pain. But as the storm of passion reached its peak, as I was lost in a feeling I had never known, a harsh, real sound shattered the perfect bubble of our secret. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was loud, insistent, and brutally ordinary against Felix's bedroom door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Felix went still above me, his body tense. Then a voice, familiar, worried, and horribly out of place. "Felix, it's Daniel. Have you seen Aisha?" The ground fell away from beneath me. A cold, sickening wave of panic washed over me, erasing all the heat and pleasure in an instant. Daniel was here, right outside the door. My husband was looking for me in the apartment of the man whose bed I was lying in. Felix turned his head to look at me. In the dim light, his expression was unreadable, a mix of shock, regret, and grim resolve. My heart pounded so violently I was sure its sound would betray us through the walls. The secret was over. The invisible thread that had connected Felix and me had just been pulled taut, and it was about to snap, unraveling my entire world.